Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here with your weekly essay read, this one entitled Inferno, and subtitled How Dante's Disturbing Poetry Fused Platonic Philosophy and Bitter Florentine Politics. Introduction. The eternal notion of the Platonic ascent, in which the journey itself is the destination, takes its most shocking form in Dante's Divine Comedy. In that epic poem, Dante connected medieval Italy to the Roman Empire by using himself and the ghost of the Roman poet Virgil as main characters. In life, Virgil had connected the Roman Empire to Greek mythology with his own epic poem. Dante, in turn, explored the ancient idea of a mythic journey out of Plato's cave and carried it into the late Middle Ages and beyond. Epic poetry. Whether passed along by word of mouth or written down, epic poetry has historically linked together the great civilizations of history with layers of reference. The Iliad and the Odyssey are the most famous poems in history. Each consists of 24 books and tens of thousands of lines of poetry in dactylic hexameter. While the Iliad recounts the brutal final year of the Greek war against Troy, the Odyssey follows a Greek hero on his long and arduous journey home from that war. Though they have a long and complex history of oral tradition shrouded in mystery, authorship of these epic poems is traditionally attributed to a quasi-historical figure called Homer. Roman society borrowed much from earlier Greek culture. To forge a national identity for Rome, the poet Virgil welded an origin myth for the Roman Empire onto the Iliad and the Odyssey. He wrote his own epic poem in Latin and copied the same meter used by Homer. In Virgil's Aeneid, the Roman prince Aeneas escapes the fall of Troy and arrives in Italy, where his bloodline eventually begets Romulus and Remus, the mythical twin founders of Rome. Dante Alighieri was born in 1265 in Florence, Italy. It was a city racked by political intrigue in Dante's time. Much of the fighting was over how much influence the nearby papacy in Rome should have over Florentine politics. Rival factions fought to the death in the streets. Dante unwisely took sides in the conflict and found himself banished from his beloved hometown, never to return. His bitterness inspired him to write an epic poem that, still to this day, deliciously haunts the imaginations of Christians and non-Christians alike. The Descent into Hell. Over the course of 100 cantos, Dante wrote the Divine Comedy in the first person, as if recounting experiences that actually happened to him. It was called a comedy because he wrote it in Italian rather than Latin. He described a grand tour of medieval cosmology starting in hell and ascending through purgatory into heaven. 33 cantos, or verses, are devoted to each of these realms, with a single canto serving as the introduction to the notorious Inferno, bringing the grand total to 100. Dante's Inferno recounts a disturbing journey into hell, chaperoned by none other than the ghost of the Roman poet Virgil. According to Dante, hell is funnel-shaped and comprises 9 levels, with the worst sinners confined to the narrow lower levels. His language is chilling, and the torments suffered by the damned are vividly described. Dante populated hell with his political enemies, inventing horrific fates for those responsible for banishing him from Florence. Filippo Argenti, for example, moved into Dante's old home after his banishment. Dante avenged himself by condemning Argenti to a gruesome fate on the 5th level of his Inferno. There, the wrathful bite and scratch at each other for all eternity in the filthy waters of the river Styx. Canto 8, verses 58 through 60, describes the scene. "Come get Filippo Argenti," they all cried, and crazed with rage, the Florentine spirit bit at his own body. Let no more be said. Sandro Botticelli began painting an illustrated manuscript of the Divine Comedy in the 1480s. Though he never completed all the illustrations, Botticelli's map of hell remains an iconic visual depiction of the funnel-shaped inferno described by Dante. Dante wrote the Divine Comedy from an explicitly Christian perspective. He consigns sorcerers, diviners, and astrologers to the 8th circle of hell, with their heads twisted around to face backwards as fitting punishment for their attempts to see the future. However, Dante also incorporated mystical numerology into his structure of the 3 sets of 33 cantos. 33 is considered a master number in magical numerology. In the Christian story, that's Jesus' age at the time of the crucifixion. It is the number of degrees in the ancient and accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, and the degrees Fahrenheit at which water melts. It's also the number of vertebrae in the human spine. Mythic ascent in the Divine Comedy. The Greek philosopher Plato organized his cosmology into horizontal planes of reality with vertical routes of access. Platonism in the ancient world emphasized an archetypical ascent between these levels. Early church fathers seized upon Platonism as their framework for Christian conceptions of heaven and earth. 19th century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously called Christianity Platonism for the people. The Roman Catholic Church went on to become the chief political power during the Middle Ages, and the old Platonic cosmology became the Christian cosmology of Europe during that time. Dante's epic poem is a compelling illustration of that cosmology, with its horizontal planes and its vertical routes of access. That's how people conceived of reality in the centuries before we had astronomers to tell us that each scattered star is really another sun. After escaping the Inferno, Virgil and Dante continue their Platonic ascent up the 9 levels of Mount Purgatory, where the unrequited love of Dante's real life, Beatrice, takes over as his tour guide. Beatrice and Dante then ascend through the 9 concentric celestial spheres of paradise together. Each of these is themed by a particular planet, the sun, the moon, or the stars. The Divine Comedy directly reflects the medieval geocentric model of the solar system, with Earth at the center, which was ultimately displaced by the modern heliocentric solar system model with which we are all familiar. Dante's geometry implied that only by going through the Inferno could he hope to climb Mount Purgatory and eventually ascend into the celestial spheres of paradise. The format of the Divine Comedy insists that the journey itself is every bit as important as the final destination. Through Dante's Annunciation, Plato's ancient notion of a mythical ascent found its definitive form during the late Middle Ages. Conclusion. Virgil bound Greek and Roman mythology together through poetry. Dante created a similar literary bridge between the Roman Empire and medieval Italy by summoning the ghost of Virgil for the Divine Comedy. This reference to the distant past anticipated the Italian Renaissance, which revived classical Greco-Roman art and literature to stunning effect. Dante didn't live to see the Renaissance, but his hometown of Florence became its epicenter about a century after he died in 1321. His epitaph reads, "Here I am shut in, Dante, exiled from my native shores, whom Florence bore, a mother of little love." Alrighty, folks, well, that's it for this week's audio essay. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider paying us a little visit over at systemfailure.org. There you can enter in your email address to receive the text versions of these weekly essays every single Sunday morning, right there in your email inbox. The text versions of these essays, of course, include pictures, classical art, and further materials by great authors like Will and Ariel Duran, the legendary historians, who chime in this week on their opinion of Dante. All right, well, I will be back on Monday with Brian, of course, for another regularly scheduled edition of the good old System Failure Podcast. I can't wait to talk to you all then. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great week.